Buenas tardes con todos.
Good afternoon. We will start our meeting of this afternoon, the final session of our 40th session. We have the presentation of the report on the activities of ECLAC 2023 and the draft program of work of ECLAC System 2026 in charge of Mrs. Sandra Manuelito, officer in charge of the Program Planning and Operations Division. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all the distinguished delegations of the member states and the associate members of ECLAC. It is an honor to address you to present the report on activities of the ECLAC corresponding to the year 2023, our most important accountability tool, as well as the proposal on the work plan for the Commission for the year 2026. And we will be listening to receive your guidelines in terms of the work priority and the strategic planning or vision to the future. I'm going to start by referring to some of the main accomplishments reached by ECLAC in the year 2023. These can be found more in detail in the document called LSC C.40/5, which compiles the most important landmarks as a regional commission at the service of the 46 member states and 14 associate members. Our most important mandate is to be the center of the thinking about sustainable development, integrating all three dimensions, economic, social, and environmental, to offer a platform for dialogue, the regulatory development, and the regional processes, and provide technical services to all the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as to create and strengthen capacities, the execution of technical projects, learning spaces, and exchange of good practices. I would like to refer to the most important achievements reached by ECLAC in the year 2023. This is a selection of these achievements, and having made this selection, we have to underscore the celebration of the 75th anniversary of ECLAC. We organized activities throughout the whole year, including the creation of a website which presents the history of the organization since the 1950 to the current time, as well as a number of keynote speeches with speakers, Ricardo Hausmann, Santiago Levy, Adela Cortina, amongst very other distinguished speakers. Some of the topics on which these keynote speeches related were the future of democracy in a digital society, the educational policy for the transforming knowledge, and how to build a more inclusive trade system. In October, ECLAC celebrated PREDIC course that was given by the Secretary General of the Conference of UNTAC. Finally, we launched a very important edition of the magazine of ECLAC. We also have the 6th meeting of the Fora of Latin America and the Caribbean on sustainable development, which took place in Santiago from the 18th to the 25th April 2023. In this event, ECLAC presented the document Latin America and the Caribbean in the midst of the way towards 2030, proposals for the future, which proposes measures to produce a mechanism to reach the accomplishment of several SDGs. We also had the 2nd meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the Regional Agreement of Access to Information, Public Access, and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is the Escazú Agreement that took place from April 19 to 21 of 2023. Belize, Chile, and Grenada were received as new member parties, and we elected the members of the support committee. In the meeting, the parties approved the Buenos Aires Agreement, or the declaration, where we have the public participation and access to justice environmental matters, and the paper in the promotion of human rights and sustainable development. We would also like to underscore the third invention of a regional dialogues on water, which took place in February 2023 within the framework for the Conference of the UN on Water, which took place last year, aiming at strengthening the existing commitments to accelerate SDG number 16. As a result, we approved the regional action agenda for water in Latin America and the Caribbean, which underscores the need to have a water transition which has to be sustainable and inclusive. Another important landmark was the launching of the regional platform for taxing contribution for Latin America and the Caribbean. This platform, created by Colombia with the support from Chile and Brazil, was initially presented during the 35th Regional Seminar on Fiscal Policy organized by ECLAC in March 2023. In its position as technical secretariat, the ECLAC has provided assistance to establish and coordinate the working groups of the platform, the aim of which was to call attention over the concerns of the region in matters related to international fiscal regulation, finding some common positions in the region on this matter. Finally, we would like to underscore the technical assistance provided by ECLAC within the framework of sustainable assistance in the lithium triangle and the geopolitics on critical minerals and technological and value of lithium in the execution of the biennial action plan of the forum. I would also like to refer to the work done by the subsidiary entities of ECLAC that offer assistance to the countries for the regulatory matters vis-a-vis common challenges, and all this works in topics related to social development, society of information, matters about women and development, statistics, population and development, South-South cooperation, planning for development and cooperation in the Caribbean. And we are receiving reports from the presidents of the different, we have received these reports from the different chairs this morning. These instances allow us to be constantly connected to you all, the member states, and learn about your demands and the priorities you have in a very dynamic way. As we said, the production of analysis and dissemination of knowledge is a very important area for all of us. And this happens through different modalities and different channels. But without doubt, the publication of emblematic publications is one of the areas more recognized. Amongst the most important publications of ECLAC, we have the 6 yearly report, the economic study, which examines different aspects of the macroeconomic situation of the region and presents projections and includes notes from countries that take the pulse of the evolution of their most important economic indicators. The report about the direct foreign investment that presents the regional panorama and the perspectives of the IDB and how these activities operate in the different countries in the region. The report on the perspective of international trade that analyzes from the scope of the region the most important trends in global economy and the structural trends, the channel of change of value and logistics for commerce. The social panorama that in the same has a comprehensive vision of diverse aspects of the region and diagnosis, measurements and policies, proposals about poverty, distribution of income, employment, gender perspective, health and education. The preliminary balance that is published in December, the preliminary overview, and sees the economic performance of every country and presents perspectives for the following year. And finally, the statistical annuary or outlook that talks about the social, economical, and environmental situation of the country, taken in from the statistic database from ECLAC. Finally, since we have not included in this slide, because we're talking about the publications from 2023, in 2024, ECLAC started publishing the new emblematic document, the panorama of the new economic views for Latin America and the Caribbean. In this new edition, we see the current efforts done in the region in terms of the productive development policies, as well as recommendations to guide the different countries and their territories in a productive distribution that will allow us to overcome the trap of low productivity and low growth and be able to get a virtuous structural change that would lead the countries into a more productive, inclusive, and sustainable future. The review of ECLAC is another emblematic publication. It aims at contributing to the exam of the problems of sustainable development with an analytics approach and also focusing on political analysts. As I said, in 2023, we published a special edition of the magazine to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Commission. I would also like to refer to the fact that in 2023, ECLAC presented its first accessible publication for all those people that had visual disabilities or reduced capacities, and thus incorporating a new institutional line of publications. All these documents can be freely accessible from our webpage. Another of the services that we provide the region is materialized through observatories and repositories that are made available to the public. So we have specialized information in the areas of statistics, gender planning, bandwidth, and economic relations with Asia Pacific, just to mention some of them. These are free of access through the webpage of ECLAC. I would also like to make a special mention to CEPAL Stat, the statistical portal of ECLAC, which systematizes the official information of the countries and of international agencies in areas of economy, social, environmental, and has become a common good for the region as well as a reference, both at the regional level as a global level in matters related to statistics and indicators for Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as methodologies for statistical purposes. It is important to show you some statistics that would represent our work in 2023. The 33 member states from the region, as well as the associated members, benefited from technical cooperation services. In this context, we carried out close to 2,000 missions to countries in the region, basically in order to support the creation and strengthening of capacities. Likewise, we came up with more than 340 publications and technical documents. We carried out 40 meetings of experts, both online and presential and hybrid meetings. We organized 14 intergovernmental meetings. We executed 41 technical cooperation projects funded by extra budgetary resources. And ECLAC was referenced more than 43,000 times in the media. To this, we had to add something that we mentioned before, that in 2023, the publications of ECLAC had more than 20 million downloads from the institutional website. This is a figure that speaks for itself and illustrates the wide dissemination of publications made by ECLAC. Well, all this has allowed us to implement mostly completely all the products committed in the yearly work plan of the Commission, and the additional 4% that you see in the slide, because we have mentioned a 96 overall implementation rate for agreed outputs. So there's a 4% missing. And you probably ask ourselves with which resources we implement all these activities. To implement our mandate, the most important funding resources for ECLAC is the regular budget assigned, and then just the contributions by the member state that in 2023 constituted close to 75% of our total budget. Out of these resources, a very important proportion is addressed to the payment of salaries of officials, as well as to cover fixed and operational costs of organization that has its main headquarters in Santiago de Chile, but that also has 2 sub-regional offices, 4 national offices, and 1 liaison office in 8 different areas spread around the world. In this context, the locations that we receive in addition to the budget from the United Nations take a more important role and are absolutely fundamental to exercise our activities. The ordinary problem of technical cooperation and the development account, and of course more and more all the extra budgetary contributions coming from very important strategic partners in the region for both bilateral and multilateral partners are so very important, because this allows us to give timely response to the rising demands coming from the countries in our region. In close coordination with our partners from the cooperation, during 2023, we continued giving support to the countries to address the impacts of the pandemic, as well as all the challenges as a result of a global juncture. This was made possible thanks to the consolidation of strategic alliances with several traditional partners like the European Union, Germany, Spain, the Republic of Korea, France, and Norway, the broadening of our associations with the private sector, and the joint mobilization of resources from other sources, from our partners from the country agreement, like the funds of donors. In this slide, you can see who our main partners in cooperation are. And in this way, we are now ready to present our proposal and the priorities that are contained in the draft program of work for the year 2026. Of course, you can examine more in detail thanks to this document called LC-640-6. This proposal, which is in line with the Agenda 2030, tries to recalibrate these efforts for public policies to rescue and accelerate the compliance of SDGs in line with the recently adopted Pact for the Future, as well as all the international commitments that other agencies like the Agenda for Action of Addis Abeba, the country agreement, the Agenda for Antigua and Barbuda for the small developing and the Declaration of Beijing, amongst others. These reflect the proposal of value of ECLAC to the member states by combining all the main 3 activities that I mentioned before: analytical, regulatory, and knowledge management, to exercise its ability to do all this analysis. Our proposal is structured around 13 interdependent and complementary sub-programs that are around 5 theme groups to facilitate the implementation through a multidisciplinary approach. As you can see, and in line with the proposals made by ECLAC presented in the recent days, the strategic priorities are addressed towards the recovery of growth through a change of the development model that will allow us to address the big transformations that are required to close the structural gaps that the region is facing to reach a future which in line with the principle of not leaving anybody behind. This proposal also incorporates all the elements, all these approaches of gender from CEPAL, and also the guidelines given by the Secretary General, and also integrates the integration of disability, which is an adaptation of a reality, of a specific reality, talking about the strategies outlined by the United Nations. Finally, this proposal is aligned with the implementation of the Secretary General reform, of the United Nations Development System that tries to deepen the cooperation amongst the agencies, funds, and programs of the United Nations in the region through the platform of regional cooperation for Latin America and Caribbean with the system of coordinators. I'm going to refer now to the structure of the program that starts with a general overview of the regional context and its possible progress, considering a medium term. Here we are examining the three proposals, followed by the implementation strategy that combine different modalities of action adapted to the nature of each program, and finally, the list of activities proposed to reach the proposed goals with approaching on these programs.
On this slide that I have right here, you can see that the subprograms are divided into 5 thematic groups. The first 3 are the ECLAC activities in the field of economic development. Subprograms 1, 2, and 3 that focus on policies and negotiations for trade, infrastructure to facilitate trade, macroeconomic policies, funding for development, the diversification of the productive sector, and innovation, as well as the regional agenda on digital matters. The second cluster are the subprograms 4, 5, and 6 that focus on social development, such as social development, poverty, youth, disabilities, gender-related matters, and demographic items. The third group addresses sustainable development from the perspective of the environment, and they are divided into subprograms 7 and 8. They deal with the economy of climate change, environmental policies, and sustainable cities, the sustainable management of biodiversity and natural resources. The fourth group is dealing with public management and training, subprograms 9, and subprogram 10 deals with statistics and data collection. And the last group, number 5, has 3 subprograms focused on sub-regional activities and regional integration programs, programs 11 through 13. Finally, in Annex 2 of the document, you will find the list of all the General Assembly resolutions, ECOSOC resolutions, and the plenary of this commission that state the legal framework for our substantive mandate and upon which we have developed this work program, the priorities and strategic actions. As we have mentioned, for ECLAC, the Agenda 2030 is universal, it's indivisible, and it's cross-cutting. It has a very important role because it sets the framework or the horizon we want to achieve. We only have 5 years to go to achieve those objectives, so we need to adjust public policies to ensure we achieve them. If we want to ensure its success, despite the infrastructure deficits we have that has been affected by the current situation, we need to take certain measures. And here we are presenting the main links between the SDGs and the draft program of work of ECLAC. This information is also available in the draft program of work for ECLAC, particularly in Table 1 contained in that document. And to wrap up, I'd just like to remind you that we have a sequence in the intergovernmental process. Once this program of work has been adopted by ECLAC, it becomes a legislative mandate for ECLAC, and in this sense, it will serve as the foundations for the preparation of the program budget for 2026. We will start working on that towards the end of the year. It will be presented timely for the examination by the General Assembly advisory groups and by its adoption by the General Assembly in December 2025. I would not like to finish without expressing our deep gratitude for the trust, support, and commitment that you as member states have offered to the work ECLAC has been carrying out in its over 75 years of work in and for the region. We are deeply proud and satisfied to continue being a key stakeholder in the development of Latin America and the Caribbean. We are here to listen to your ideas, guidance, and any proposal you may have that will help in improving the program that we have presented to you this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Madam in charge, Madam Manuelito. Thank you very much for such a deep report. Now we would like to give the floor to the delegations who wish to make statements associated to this presentation. Please raise your nameplates so that we can give you the floor. Guatemala has the floor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Mr. Jose Manuel Saran, Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latin America and the Caribbean, heads of delegation, delegates. I would like to warmly greet each and every one of you who are here on behalf of Ambassador Carlos Ramirez, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, who apologizes for not being here in person today. I would like to very briefly touch upon this topic to thank you on behalf of Guatemala for the presentation of the report on the activities of the Commission that they carried out while Argentina was holding the chairmanship. We would like to thank Argentina for their work in leading the region from this very important scenario. The transformations in this current environment will offer opportunities against the challenges. So we need to continue working on the priorities of our region in terms of sustainable development. It is clear that we need to strengthen the areas where there are weaknesses, to include concepts of resilience that will allow Latin America and the Caribbean to revisit the way in which we should face challenges so that we can have a more productive, inclusive, and sustained development. Finally, we hope the best for the presidency that Peru will now undertake for the term from 2024 to 2026. We have more than 166 years of diplomatic relations that have enabled us to work together on cooperation matters, among others. This will serve as a framework for the future dialogues we have so that we can achieve our common goals. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. We have now reached the moment to make a brief break before we move on to the consideration and adoption of resolutions of the 40th session of ECLAC and the closing ceremony. Ambassador Edme Chaler is on his way. We had asked him to come earlier. He's on his way. While we wait for him, we're going to take a short break. Thank you very much.
Muy buenas.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your patience. We will take on this last leg of our 40th session. Before going on to the consideration and approval of the resolutions, I am pleased to inform you that we have information about the vice presidencies that will accompany Peru for the upcoming term. I would like to give the floor to our Secretary, Luis Yanez, who will report on this matter. Mr. Luis Yanez, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As the General Director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Peru, Maria Eugenia Echevarria, pointed out yesterday that there was a consultation opportunity for those delegations that would like to accompany Peru in the vice presidency during the next 2 years should so express. And there was a term until this morning. And I would like to inform you, and I would like to propose the following delegations that have expressed an interest in accompanying Peru for the next 2 years. The delegations of Colombia, Panama, Dominican Republic, and British Virgin Islands. So we would be ready to propose the approval of this board that would be presided over by Peru. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I want to thank the delegations of the countries that have been mentioned for being willing to take on these tasks despite their very busy agendas. For Peru, it is a source of appreciation. So I would like to present to the meeting the proposal to allow these 4 countries to accompany Peru as vice presidents during Peru's biennial presidency of ECLAC. I don't see any objections. It is so approved.
Bueno,
Distinguished members and participants, we will now move on to the consideration and approval of the resolutions of the 40th session of ECLAC. To this end, I give the floor once again to the Secretary of the Commission, Dr. Luis Yanez, to inform us on the matter. Mr. Secretary, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You have on your desks a separate sheet of paper as well as a booklet. We have the draft resolution number 14. It's the separate sheet of paper you have before you. As you may well remember, in the dialogue of Ministers of Foreign Affairs on 9 September, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic offered the Dominican Republic for the meeting, the 41st meeting of ECLAC, and he asked that we accept this by acclamation, but it wasn't the right time. It is now the time to approve this proposal, and we should ask the members if we are in the condition to accept this proposal. Therefore, I ask the member states of ECLAC here if we are ready to adopt this resolution. I see no objection. The resolution stands approved. We would like to compliment the Dominican Republic. And now I would like to talk about document DSC1/DS. It is the room document of October 3, which is the draft resolution that have been adopted at referendum after the silence period that was completed on September 16th, 11 p.m. New York. Let me explain. On 22 August, through the permanent missions in New York, we sent the zero version to the members of ECLAC in New York. There was a calendar of negotiations, and there was a deadline to send any updates to the drafting. Until 5 September, there were 5 consultations on virtual format on 4, 5, 9, and 13 September. On 16 September, the latest version was placed in the silence procedure until 18 September at 11 a.m. New York time. None of the delegations of ECLAC members interrupted the silence period. The resolutions are in the number of 13 that need to be adopted during this session. Mr. Chairman, you may submit to approval the 13 draft resolutions. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. In view of what has been reported by the Secretary to this plenary, we will submit the document with the 13 draft resolutions that have already been adopted by the silence procedures and that are related to the 40th session of ECLAC. There is no opposition, so I would like to hammer down as a symbol of approval of the 13 resolutions.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I can see I see the nameplate of Argentina that is requesting the floor. The delegation of Argentina has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru. The draft resolutions 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 13 contain paragraphs that contradict the guiding principles and the positions that you know of our foreign policies. Argentina, in this regard, would like to remind you that it has laws of access to rights that go beyond the international obligations and that it is strongly committed in protecting the individual rights of every human being based on international treaties of which it is a party. Whereas the 2030 agenda that is included in this draft has non-binding proposals that each state, in the exercise of its sovereignty, may interpret and pursue freely. The idea of interpreting this agenda to turn it into a policy that promotes specific items, as is the Pact of the Future and annexes, goes against the freedom of nations and the pluralism of the agenda itself, which should be enforced applying priorities and policies at the national interest. There is state interventionism, as the history of Argentina shows. Statism goes against the freedom of peoples, affects the economy of those countries that implement them, and brings about unsustainable development and prevents us from achieving the goals that are set in these multilateral instruments, like not leaving anyone behind. We in Argentina seek to develop and combat poverty using free trade policies as well as respecting the rights of all, as has been proven once and again. With regard to the protection of rights, Argentina strongly believes that the general concept of women includes women in all their ages. Dividing women into and girls weakens the general protection that derives from that concept. It gives the idea that girls are not included, for instance, in the Convention for the Discrimination Against All Forms of discrimination against women. This doesn't seem to strengthen the human rights of women and girls. Argentina points out, in addition, that it is not acceptable to talk about sexual and reproductive health in a text that talks about girls, that they should be preserved in their physical integrity. They cannot give consent because of their infancy. The Republic of Argentina, in this sense, highlights that it made the following declaration in terms of interpreting this concept when we adopted the Convention of the Child in connection to Article 24F. And I quote, "The Republic of Argentina, considering that the issues associated with family planning depend on parents based on the ethical and moral principles, interprets that it is the obligation of the states within the scope of this article to adopt the measures that are adequate to provide guidance to parents and education for family planning that is of responsible nature." In addition, Argentina highlights that the Convention on the Rights of the Child are in Article 5 states that parents have the right to provide guidance to their children, observing the purposes established in Article 29, and that we should respect also the right of children to the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, and that is under quotes. And also, quote, "The rights and duties of parents or custodians should guide children in the exercise of their rights based on their own development," end of quote, as derives from Article 14, paragraphs 1 and 2 of the above-mentioned convention. We are committed to the right of family privacy, so we believe that parents, vis-a-vis the states, have the priority right to educate their children based on their own beliefs. And taking into account their own development, they have the freedom of thought, belief, and religion. On the other hand, in the Inter-American region, educating children is not only a right but also a duty, as is stated in the American Declaration of Duties and Obligations of Human Beings in Article 13. Everyone has the right to protect and see for the well-being of their children who are underage. This is also true for the religious education. The Inter-American Convention on Human Rights establishes that parents and custodians have the right for their children to receive the religious and moral education that they believe in. Article 124 of the American Convention on Human Rights. Argentina reminds the meeting that in the Cairo Action and the Beijing Agreement of 1995 dealing with sexual and reproductive health, we prohibited abortion as an integral component thereof, and that procedure cannot be considered as a state as a method of family planning. We also understood that any change, any measure associated to abortion within the health system can only be determined domestically or locally following the national legislative procedure. Since then, all UN resolutions have recognized that the international system of human rights does not include access to abortion as an obligation to abide by the member states. As for the duty of care, there is a duty of care within the regional and universal framework in connection with the obligations parents have vis-a-vis their children and the concept of family solidarity that is included in several documents, and the idea that the care is an idea of obstacles to the exercise of rights, especially women, is a contradiction. This contradiction sees care as a work, for example, when we use paid and unpaid care work. In fact, the treaties show that this is a duty and an obligation of the family members and not as a paid or unpaid job. In Argentina, care is necessary when the family undertakes it on a voluntary basis. This is a matter of private solidarity, and turning it into a paid activity does not enable society to properly evaluate. This would weaken this duty of care, and it would open the possibility for the state to intervene in the family's private life. So Argentina would like to set aside its position on these matters, and we would like that our reservation be included in the final report of this meeting.
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative from Argentina. We shall proceed as requested, and that we are to include this in the minutes. We will see this opinion versed during this meeting by the Argentinian Republic. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to give the floor to the Secretary Luis Yáñez from ECLAC, so that he may report on what will be the course of action in terms of these approved resolutions that have been approved in this session. You are acknowledged. As you have said, Mr. Chair, the Secretariat will prepare a report, as it is normally done, about this session that would include all 14 draft proposals, the list of participants, the summaries of the debate, and the declaration made by one member state of ECLAC explaining their vote. This will be distributed to all those delegations present, and later on will be sent to the Social Economic Council, ECOSOC, for their knowledge in the next meeting. So this is the way to proceed, and by doing this, we would conclude all the works of this 40th session of ECLAC, and we would now move to our closing ceremony, if you so agree, Mr. President. Yes, Mr. Secretary, thank you. Our secretary has told us that we are about to conclude all our work, so quite willingly, I will now close this working session of the 40th session of Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we will just start with the last part of our sessions, which is the closing ceremony. And to this end, I am pleased to give the floor for his closing remarks. Sorry for the repeat of words. Our Executive Secretary, José Manuel Salazar. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Minister. Greetings to all of you. Ambassador Elmer Schialer, the country holding the chair of the 40th session of ECLAC. Mrs. Rosana Duciak, resident coordinator of the United Nations in Peru. Dear ministers and delegates of ECLAC member states, high-ranking Peruvian government authorities, member of the diplomatic corps, representatives of international agencies, and colleagues from the UN system and ECLAC. Friends, throughout these 3 days, you, ladies and gentlemen delegates, have shared your perspectives on the challenges of each of your countries, of the region, and of the world. But they have also shared profound reflections and ideas on how to manage in a more effective way the indispensable transformation in our development models, which was precisely the exercise we invited you to undertake at this 40th session of ECLAC, based on the position paper that we presented to you in a spirit of rethinking, reimagining, and transforming the region's development models. We invited you to discuss and analyze not only what to do, but how to do it, and this not only in light of the diagnosis of the situations in the region, but also in light of geo-economic, technological, and geopolitical changes in the world. From listening and after listening carefully to all the intervention over three past days, I leave with the firm impression that this emphasis on the house, grounded, as we invited you to do, in the concrete and practical issues of governance, of the top capacities of institutions, spaces for social dialogue, and the political economy of transformations, has been very well received and has given rise to a conversation that has not only been very rich, but also, and more importantly, very useful and pragmatic. So, We will continue quite enthusiastically to dig deeper into these issues, reading and interpreting the global economic, political, technological, climate change, and sustainability-related megatrends, thinking about prospective scenarios and what they tell us about a more anticipatory, more empowered, more relevant governments today and in the face of future scenarios. And of course, we start from our reading of the three traps in which we see our region mired, one of low capacity for growth, another of high inequality, low social mobility, and weak social cohesion, and a third of low institutional capacities and ineffective governments, as well as the challenges placed by climate change and the environmentally unsustainable pattern of development. In the paper, we warn about the dangers of failing to act to break out these traps and close the gaps. Dangers that can lead us to a variety of dystopian scenarios of stagnation, further environmental degradation, greater inequality, greater poverty, and also about fear, frustration, polarization, and conflict. We also speak of the heterogeneity of situations within our region, including the very specific vulnerabilities affecting the small island states of the Caribbean, as well as the vulnerability of certain population groups, such as indigenous and Afro-descendant populations, amongst others. We began the paper and our reflections by characterizing the new international geoeconomic and geopolitical, as well as technological, climatic, and demographic context, and asking the important question on how to navigate throughout these realities, how to minimize the risks, and how to seize the opportunities in terms of the growth strategies of economies and the broader development and welfare aspirations of societies. And that was one of the central questions and issues of the Dialogue of Foreign Ministers with which we began this session. We heard different perspectives, but they all agreed that in the midst of all the tensions and threats that we see in the world geopolitics today, there are also processes associated with the UN system, with the countries of the region must take advantage of to work for a better world. We are talking about the Pact of the Future, recently adopted as a step in the right direction, as a very useful framework to strengthen international cooperation on such important issues and to strengthen the multilateral system. We also talked about how the world and Latin America and the Caribbean need and would benefit from a peaceful world, a strong multilateral system, a rules-based trading system, collaboration to move towards sustainable development, progress on SDGs, and tackling climate change. We talked about how desirable it would be to be able to have common positions of the region before various international fora, inspired by the idea that we must maintain and nurture a spirit of hope, and that, as the UN Secretary General reiterated at the opening of the recently held General Assembly, the challenges facing the world have a solution, and that the solution lies in international cooperation. In order to move forward towards a productive, inclusive, and sustainable development, ECLAC has proposed 11 major transformations that we consider indispensable. Of these, we select 4 for an in-depth analysis with an emphasis of how to achieve them. Well, I'm not going to be repeating all 4 of them. At the first roundtable, which was held yesterday, Thursday, distinguished panelists and the delegations discussed our basis diagnosis of development traps and the transformations that are indispensable. There was agreement on the relevance of the concept of traps, which are defined as self-reinforcing vicious circles, and the need for the region to make more comprehensive and long-term efforts to overcome them. They highlighted the importance of achieving higher growth rates, which, while not sufficient, are necessary to reduce poverty and informality, create quality employment, and overcome the other traps. It was pointed out that in addition to productive development policies, a central factor in boosting economic growth is greater investment in science, technology, technology and innovation. These efforts should be part of a state policy that transcends governments and short-term strategies. The comments also highlighted the importance of strengthening institutional capacities and enhancing regional integration. In the second roundtable, the dialogue focused on the low capacity to grow trap, how to achieve higher, sustained, inclusive, and sustainable growth. The importance that ECLAC and the document presented validated the importance that we give to productive development policies with a modern approach that is not based on tariff and subsidies, but on collaboration between all key sectors in the public, private, and academic sectors. It was also recognized that a modern productive development policy should have a broader approach, including not only industrial sectors, but also agricultural activities and services, recognizes the importance of a territorial approach and coordinating the actions of different levels of government, the importance of institutional capacity building, governance, and social dialogue to advance in the design and implementation of productive development policies was also underlined. In the third roundtable, the conversation focused on how to reduce inequality and promote social inclusion and social mobility. The importance of an integrated approach to the causes of the high inequality trap, low social mobility, and weak social cohesion was recognized. The distinguished panelists highlighted in particular the importance of moving towards a care society and as an indispensable element to close the gender gap and contribute to reducing inequality. The importance of long-term efforts with continuity of state policy was also recognized. To this end, there was agreement on the importance of strong institutions with the capacity not only to formulate and implement innovative strategies, but also to evaluate the results and make adjustments whenever necessary. In addition to the 6 main factors that explain inequality and low social mobility and cohesion in Latin American Caribbean countries, discrimination on ethnic racial grounds was highlighted, which particularly affects the indigenous and the Afro-descendant populations. It was also stressed that education must be at the center of priorities to prevent it from being an intergenerational reproducer of inequality. Finally, in the fourth roundtable, which took place this morning, we addressed another of the major transformations proposed by ECLAC, how to promote sustainability and address climate change. The panelists agreed that a comprehensive approach to this transformation requires enabling conditions such as institutional strengthening with legislative, administrative, and policy changes. The importance of active participation of the private sector and civil society was noted. Latin America and the Caribbean faces a huge financing gap to overcome its climate change and biodiversity protection challenges. The panel underlined that the green productive development strategy must jointly take into account the fight against climate change and the protection of biodiversity. It was recognized that a just transition and exploitation of new opportunities includes key sectors such as the expansion of renewables, electromobility, and strategic minerals, amongst others. The final chapter of our report dealt with the issue of financing for development. We did not have a specific roundtable on this fundamental issue, but we dealt it in a cross-cutting manner in the different roundtables, and it is an issue that we will continue working on, especially in the run-up to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development in Spain in July 2025. Ladies and gentlemen delegates, during this 40th session of ECLAC, we have had the honor of receiving a total of 365 participants, 9 foreign ministers, 8 ministers of state, 7 vice ministers and undersecretaries, a total of 36 delegations and 122 delegates. We have also been accompanied by 63 representatives of various agencies, funds, and programs of the United Nations system, together with representatives of intergovernmental organizations, cooperation agencies, financial institutions, and development banks, as well as civil society organizations, the private sector, and academia. I would like to reiterate our thanks to the government of Peru to its president, Mrs. Dina Boluarte Segarra, to its foreign minister, Mr. Elmer Schialer, and to the entire team of the Peruvian Foreign Ministry and the government of Peru, who supported this meeting in every way possible and made it not only a successful meeting in substance, but also a very pleasant experience of unparalleled hospitality. I would like to thank Ambassador Eugenia Echevarria, who presided over several of these working tables and these sessions for long periods of time. I would also like to thank the panelists and guests whose excellent contributions and idea enriched and allowed us to discuss all the topics proposed in our position document. I am also grateful to receive the report on the activities carried out by ECLAC in 2023, which reports on the fulfillment of our programmatic commitments and contains the publications, observatories, results of meetings, and in general, the knowledge and technical assistance that we make available to member countries. I am also grateful for the adoption of a program of work for 2026 that would guide ECLAC's future work. Your input and feedback are of great value in ensuring the relevance and pertinence of our efforts in the region. ECLAC's intergovernmental architecture is one of our greatest institutional assets, as was made clear from the 10 reports we heard about this morning on the activities of ECLAC subsidiary bodies and the outcomes of other intergovernmental meetings organized by ECLAC since our last session. As was clear, there are thousands of participants in this multiplicity of bodies and meetings. In this regard, I would like to thank the chairs of the committees and conferences for their reports. The results reflect their great commitment and leadership, as well as the impact of our joint work. I acknowledge and thank my ECLAC colleagues for their work in organizing this meeting and preparing the document that was presented. These 3 days are the result and culmination of months and months of very hard work by a committed team of officials of our Commission. Thank you very much and congratulations, colleagues. It is a great honor to lead your competent and committed team. My friends, ECLAC will continue to collaborate with all the countries in the region in managing the transformations that are essential to overcome the traps and close the development gaps that characterize us and to move towards a more productive, inclusive, and sustainable pattern of development. We are very pleased and motivated by the fact that the document we presented to you was well received, not only as profound in its analysis, but also and above all as useful in setting directions. And we can assure you that we will continue to elaborate on these topics and adapt them to the situations of each sub-region and country. Count on ECLAC to continue to be a strategic partner for you as a government and for the societies of the region in general in promoting innovative ways to face the challenges and manage the necessary changes and transformations. Thank you very much, and I wish you a safe return to your respective destinations. Thank you very much.
Mr. Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Jose Manuel Salazar Shirinax, Mr. Heads of delegation, members of the delegations attending these meetings, ladies and gentlemen, members of the ECLAC Secretariat, distinguished guests and national authorities, ladies and gentlemen. The 40th session of ECLAC that we are concluding today has served as an important platform for reflection, exchanging experiences and good practices in the areas of public policies and the evaluation of concrete proposals to achieve the transformations that will enable Latin America and the Caribbean to overcome the development traps we face, the 3 development traps that we have analyzed, we have looked at, and that are right there for us to address and solve. As we have seen during these days of our session, only by working together will we be able to face the challenges of the current global scenario. By hosting the session in our country, Peru has sought to generate a confluence of ideas with a view to developing a working agenda that promotes regional cooperation as well as the implementation of public policies and programs focusing on inclusion, improving the general welfare of peoples, and the fight against inequalities. The presentation and analysis of the position paper prepared by ECLAC Secretariat has made it possible to achieve this objective. It is, as the President of the Republic of Peru emphasized, of a valuable diagnostic document which analyzes the current situation in our region and its main challenges, and which also suggests the various lines of actions to achieve the transformations it proposes. It will now be up to each member state, through its competent sectors, to evaluate and assess these proposals, taking into account its national circumstances and priorities. This will allow them to appropriately use this very important tool. In this regard, I would like to thank the ECLAC team for this diagnosis, as well as for the contribution it makes through the preparation and dissemination of a wide range of knowledge products and publications on economic and social development. They all seek to provide technical support for the advancement of policies aimed at the well-being of our population. Peru believes that ECLAC is a strategic ally, a very important ally for all member states, and we hope that during the next biennium it will continue to develop a series of initiatives that will have an impact on our economies, as well as on the well-being of our peoples. Ladies and gentlemen, Peru encourages all ECLAC member states and associate states to redouble their efforts with a view to placing sustainable development even more at the center of the international cooperation agenda, while continuing to promote disaster risk management, environmental preservation, and the sustainable use of natural resources, addressing the challenges arising from climate change that particularly affect our countries. We are aware that it is important to have a pragmatic vision, focusing on concrete and effective solutions with the aim of generating sustainable economic development without leaving anyone behind. Therefore, the changes we make in the coming years will be key to move towards a more equitable and sustainable future. The Peruvian presidency until 2026 will seek to promote greater cooperation within this framework. This will help us in achieving a better future for all our citizens, especially for the most vulnerable. We invite you to actively participate in the conferences, research projects, and technical cooperation activities coordinated by ECLAC during this period. We also thank you for your presence at this 40th session and for sharing your national experiences and perspectives. This will contribute to enriching our debates. I have no doubt that together we can build a more resilient and promising future for Latin America and the Caribbean. I would not like to conclude these brief remarks without reinstating my deep gratitude to all the delegations of the countries that are members, as well as associate members who have attended here, this 40th session, the heads of intergovernmental offices that are also present, as well as their teams. And of course, the wonderful ECLAC team that is headed by our executive secretary. And last but not least, the Peru team, headed by Ambassador Maria Eugenia Echevarria, who has done a great job not only on substantive matters and conducting the debates, but and in achieving the consensus necessary to arrive at the approval of these 13 resolutions that we adopted just a few minutes ago. I would also like to thank the colleagues of protocol, the organization, infrastructure, that were very worried in ensuring that the stay of our distinguished guests was the best possible. With these remarks, I would like to declare closed the 40th session of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Se acabó. Muchas gracias, querido. Muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias a ustedes. Muchas gracias. Gracias por todo. Por Dios, gracias. Muy bien.